welcome to Daddy Life London. Just to start with, I'm having a nightmare doing this vlog. This is my 4th attempt. First 3 interrupted by child, 3rd time because he'd done a poo and I was the only one that could deal with it apparently. And for some reason I forgot to press the record button, so I've been talking for 10 minutes and nothing had been recording. So forgive me if I sound a little bit rehearsed, because I kind of am. So for those who don't know me, I'm an adoptive dad of 2, previously of 1. I haven't done an adoption vlog since we've had our 2nd child, or even through any of that process, to be fair. It was very different, lots of different focuses. You don't have as much free time because you've already got 1 child and you're trying to do the process and you're trying to work. So I just didn't have that time to do the vlogging that I did previously. And this time round, I was the secondary carer, not the primary carer. I was primary carer first time round, so again had more time to do this sort of thing. And I just happened to find myself in a couple of weeks off and thought it'd be good to do some updates. You know, what was the process like, the transition, how has family life changed? And today I'm going to focus on the process the 2nd time round. So the process the 2nd time round, and obviously I'm in the UK, sorry, I shouldn't say the UK, England and Wales, because I know the Scottish system is different, is that essentially, for those of you that know the adoption process, you go straight into stage 2, assuming that you're approved to be taken forward the agency of your choice. We went back to the agency that we used previously, or I should say the local authority that moved into that agency, because previously it wasn't regionalised, and we got in contact with our original social worker because she was superb, and our local authority allowed us to use her, which was great. Some don't like you to, but we had a good conversation with them about the benefits for us of having her, and they let us have her. I don't know, mate.
I don't know.
Okay, would you mind just... there you go, I'll come down in a sec, okay? I don't know. One sec. So I've decided this time I'm not going to start re-recording, because this will be my 5th time if I do that. So I may have to just do some edits. So our local authority or regional agency let us have our social worker, which is amazing. Straight into stage 2. They like to have some conditions around your first child. So our agency wanted the child to be at least 3, our first child, and there had to be at least a 2-year age gap between them. So the 2-year age gap is quite common from what I hear. That's just about making sure there's a significant development gap between the 2 of them, particularly with looked after children who can be at a range of different stages in their development journey compared to birth regular children, however you want to call it. I hate those terms, but you know what I mean. And our agency in particular said that the first child had to be over 3. So we did have to wait a little bit before we started, but we got cracking as soon as that was the case. So in terms of the stage 2, you'll know that's all about home study, you'll do some training. Now, with our agency, the training was optional depending on how recently you had adopted previously, but also what your level of, I guess, competence is the wrong word, but involvement in the adoption community is. And I at the time was an Adoption UK volunteer. I'd done some volunteering for themselves as well, to do talking at their training sessions. So they were really comfortable that we as a couple were in tune with the adoption community, what was going on, recent legislation, all that sort of stuff. So we didn't need to do training, and what we focused on was us, how we'd changed, what sort of parents we were, our little boy, because ultimately, as much as we want to extend our family, this was all about him and what he could cope with and what we could offer to another child, considering what his needs were. And I say that at the time, we knew he was a busy little boy, let's call it, but he's a very friendly, happy chap. But we could tell that there was potential things coming that we might have to deal with. So we had to think about that in terms of what we could cope with from a 2nd child perspective, which ultimately meant that, as straightforward as it could be, we wanted a fairly straightforward adoption, relatively young child that we could have a level of influence over, accepting that that was the same with our little boy, and you can't predict some of the other health issues or mental health issues that might come in the future. I probably shouldn't say mental health, neurodiversity issues. So we probably approached it a lot more clinically than the first time. Chopping in, right, sorry, the camera is messing up, but I'm getting back in. So we started the process. It was about 3 months. We did lots of sessions with our social worker at our house. Did some through Zoom. Talked a lot about life story in particular. You know, our little boy has a very specific life story, and we knew that it was unlikely we were going to get a similar life story. So we really had to think about reminding ourselves of all the factors that looked after children come with. You know, fast, neurodiverse issues, alcohol, drugs, neglect, abuse, all that sort of stuff. And we needed to remind ourselves of the things that we weren't necessarily as recently familiar with from our little boy. So we did that. We went on some No Matter What webinars, which I can't recommend enough. I'll put some links into the details of this vlog. So they're the Sally Donovan webinars. We focus specifically around life story work, adopting again, and we also got some of our friends and family to attend adoption, kind of your support network group. So focus for them about reminding them about what type of children you could get, because although we'd kind of been through that with our support network before, our support network had changed a bit from when we first got assessed, but also they were so used to our little boy and his needs that it was important to remind them of what another child's needs might look like. So we went through that. Like I say, that was about 3 months. Went to panel, and I must say this panel was probably a lot more rigorous almost than our first one, but it was super. It was all done remotely, but really good. And this time around, you got some really good feedback from them, which is just really helpful to understand their view on us as a couple and what our strengths were. So I was really, really pleased with that. I think what was then the most difficult for me was the family finding element. Now, ultimately, we got matches pretty quickly. There were 2 or 3 that came along. But as I said earlier, it suddenly became a lot more clinical than it was before, and you really spent a lot more time going through their profiles, reading through their CPR, and trying to work out, well, if I've got to explain this to child 1 and then this to child 2, and you're thinking about a life story and talking about their life story, how will that influence each other? What similarities or, differences will they have? And that just became, quite a lot to take on, particularly with some of the challenges of these children. And as a lot of you all know, if you're already an adopter, the very young children tend to come from very challenging backgrounds, particularly if they're not removed at birth, or if they are removed at birth. So we went through a number of profiles, and we actually ended up in a competitive process with one person or one couple, which I have to say I really didn't enjoy. Apparently it's more and more common, and what that means, for those of you who don't know, is that sometimes if there's enough adopters per child, they will try and interview the social worker and the family finder of the child, up to 3 couples. Not to necessarily pit you against each other, but you kind of are, what is it you can offer versus what they can offer. And they don't talk to you like that, they just interview you about your strengths. But it was, considering we didn't get the first one, and all worked out right in the end. It was all meant for a reason. We got our little one now and couldn't be happier with them. So, but I just thought it was important to reference that, because that was a bit of an emotional roller coaster going through that process, and then waiting for the feedback, which took a while. And then we did interview for our little one now, but not competitively. We did interview, and it took ages to get feedback as well. It was a couple of weeks, and I think you have to be prepared for that. I don't think it's right, by the way. I think you should get feedback more quickly, because this is such a big part of your life and what you're doing. And we did give some feedback to the agencies about that. It wasn't our agency's issue, because it's ultimately the local authority that they're working with, where the child is being looked after. But yeah, just those pockets of time can be a real emotional drain. So anyway, look, that's it. That's a short synopsis of the process for us and what we've been doing. And the next one I'm going to do is about our transition for our second child, with a bit of a focus on how we got our first child ready, how we got the second child ready for coming to us and knowing that we had a first child, and some of the interesting things that went with that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again soon.